When I say ultimate driving machine, one car brand probably comes to mind. And that's an amazing feat of marketing success by BMW, because growing up, I was convinced that if I wanted the purest driving experience, I had to own a BMW. So imagine my surprise when I started driving this, the BMW 218i Gran Coupe, because right off the bat, things are looking a little bit off. Ask any driving enthusiast and they'll probably tell you that the most fun car layout is the one with the engine in the front, where the power goes to the rear and you sit in the middle. And arguably, not many do this layout better than BMW. So as someone who hasn't experienced the sheer driving pleasure of a well set up front engine rear wheel drive car, I was excited to be testing out my first BMW. However, when you look at the BMW 218i Gran Coupe, immediately there seems to be a problem. This car is powered by a 1.5-litre turbocharged inline 3-cylinder engine that makes about 140 horsepower and 220 Newton meters of torque. But that power is sent straight to the front wheels. Now, that's not to say that there aren't front-wheel drive cars that are fun to drive. Most hot hatches are a testament to that. It's just that this BMW 218i Gran Coupe doesn't come very close to topping that list. For starters, the power figures don't really line up with how sporty this car looks or how many M badges BMW has included in the price tag. Even in sport mode, if I were to put my foot down, like I just spend the whole time waiting for the power to come in, and then when it finally sort of comes in, the gear shifts, and then you're like thrown like front to back for that. Some of that probably has to do with the fact that the car just isn't very powerful. I mean, even the Proton X50, which also has a 1.5-litre 3-cylinder turbocharged engine, makes more power. But to me, my least favorite part about the powertrain has to be the gearbox. Yes, it may say dual clutch transmission on the brochure, but it feels incredibly lazy, especially on twisty back roads. Put your foot down at the exit of a slow corner and you don't feel anything from the power plant, something I have yet to experience in a car that costs more than 200,000 ringgit, much less one that looks as sporty as this. To make matters worse, there are also no paddle shifters on the wheel. Instead, if you want to bang up and down the gears yourself, you'll have to use the gear stick the old-fashioned way. And this would have been fine if you had a nice substantial stick to grab onto, but all you get in the 218i Gran Coupe is this. Ugh. Coupled with the tires that screech a lot without providing a lot of grip, and I have to say that the BMW doesn't feel like it was designed for a particularly sporty drive. At least, not in my novice hands. At this point, it may sound like I'm giving this car a hard time for not being what it probably was never meant to be. And yes, I know that the M Sport moniker adds about as much performance to your car as RGB lights adds performance to your gaming computer. But the reason I wanted it to be a more sporty drive is because you're actually giving up quite a lot of practicality to get that sports car feel in this 218i. The front seats, for example, aren't nearly as plush as I would have liked it to be, and when you couple that with the relatively firm ride, it's not a particularly comfortable car to be in for long periods of time. For my height, I also have to have the seat almost to the floor so that I can see out of the windshield that's attached to the low sweeping roofline. That means that my thighs are not supported by the seat, and my seat is pushed quite far back. And when this happens, the rear gets really cramped. Now, I'm not a tall guy, I'm just under 180 centimeters, but with the driver's seat pushed back for someone of my height, I can't even sit comfortably in the back seat. If I want legroom, I have to sit upright and run my head into the low swooping coupe roofline, or give my head space by squeezing my knees around the side of the seat. Also, what's up with the opening of this window? It's barely half open. What? Luckily, boot space is kind of acceptable, but again, not great. Now, maybe I would have been able to forgive it if, the rest of the car was really excellent. Like, for example, if it had a very nice premium cabin experience. And I guess in some ways it's pretty nice. It is quite a premium cabin, but there are a couple of really weird design choices. For starters, there's nowhere to put your sunglasses in the 218i. Like, what? Okay, I know this sounds like such a small thing to point out, but when you consider the fact that there aren't really a whole lot of specialized compartments for your stuff, like phones and keys and sunglasses, I ended up just stuffing everything into the center console's armrest storage, like a poor person. Then there's the door lock mechanism, which looks to me like it came straight out of the Stone Ages. I honestly haven't seen one of these in such a long time that I almost couldn't believe my eyes. I mean, even my Myvi doesn't have this anymore. I guess the upside is that now you have somewhere to hang your teh tarik ikat tepi. There are two very nice screens in here, like the digital cluster and the infotainment unit are both, they both look really nice. They are smooth with pretty nice refresh rates. It's also very responsive touch controls, so it's not really an issue. You also don't have any problems viewing it outdoors, which is a good thing. Although I think if I want to nitpick, the infotainment screen could be a little bit bigger, because as it is right now, it's quite small. But the thing I found absolutely ridiculous though is that you have to pay extra to enable Apple CarPlay. And it's not like a small token fee. It's 1,299 ringgit to have this feature enabled. That's one entire top-spec Redmi Note 11 Pro just so you can connect your iPhone to your BMW via CarPlay. You may argue that I shouldn't be looking at BMWs like this, that this is just what comes with the territory when you buy a brand new car in the premium segment. But that's the thing, if you spend any time in this BMW 218i at all, you can see where this car was kind of built down to a price. There are a myriad of hard plastics and cheap filling bits and bobs scattered around the car, but particularly obvious to me were the buttons in the center console. It does that thing where if you press one button, the whole row moves, and that's usually a sign of cost cutting. Honestly, as my first BMW, that was a little bit disappointing to see. And unfortunately, things aren't that good looking from the outside either. I remember the first time I saw pictures of it online, and I thought that the proportions were all wrong. The nose looked a little too big, especially when you contrast it with the rear where the light elements are all small and squinty. I also don't like the ridiculous number of M badges tacked all over, because to me that badge should represent performance, and as I've established earlier, it drives nothing like a performance car. There's even a ridiculous light under the side mirrors that projects a BMW word mark onto the floor in case you forgot what car you were driving. It was all a little too much for me at first, a little too abing for my liking. It has grown on me a little bit though since I started driving it. I think if you are gonna get it though, you should get it in this red colorway. I think this is probably the nicest color for this car. And if you look at it, like especially from this angle, it does look pretty nice. I think it's the nicest angle for the car. I've also started to notice and appreciate the more subtle touches that elevate your car ownership experience the more time I spend with it. Like the big chunky steering wheel, which at first I did not like. But as it turns out, when you're hooning it through the twisty roads, it's really nice to have a big chunky wheel to hang on to. And yes, while I did rag on some of the interior finishings in the first place, it's not all bad. The main elements in the cabin that you interact with daily, stuff like the steering wheel, the door grab handle, they all feel like they're finished really well with nice stitching and soft touch materials. There's also a strong sense of practicality when you drive this car more often. I love, for example, that BMW didn't shy away from including buttons for all your important controls on both the steering wheel and the center console. Though they may have added a couple too many buttons in my opinion. I also appreciate the inclusion of an iDrive controller despite the fact that you can adjust and control everything via the touchscreen. They could have very easily left that out, but I'm really glad that they didn't because it makes navigating the infotainment system so much easier when you're on the move. Then there are the more premium touches, like the lovely frameless windows and keyless entry system. I can't overstate how much I love being able to just walk away from the car with the key in my pocket and have it lock itself. That's a rich people kind of thing. Yes, it's definitely not the ultimate driving machine that I was led to believe growing up. At least this one isn't. But, I mean, and I know the purists are gonna hate me for this, it still does have this badge. And it's still technically a BMW. And it being a BMW, especially in our modern society that's so obsessed with brand and image, may just be worth its weight in gold. Let me give you an example. When I reviewed the Volkswagen Arteon, I thought it was a gorgeous car. I thought it had more presence and visual weight than any of the BMWs or Mercs in its class, and I still stand by that opinion. But what you didn't see and what we cut out from the review was a segment where we drove around and parked it in various places just to see how many double takes the car would get from people on the street. And the reason you didn't see that clip was that we got 0 double takes. Okay, so we're doing a little bit of a social experiment right now, trying to see if the car really does turn heads. See this fella, see? Yeah. They working lah, bro. That's why they're not looking. Ah, this guy. You look at his phone, no?
There's a fight there.
There's a fight? Ah, now they're crossing. See, they look or not? Go. You're welcome. Look at my car. Come on. Fail. No! Absolute fail.
This guy looking at.
We'll see, might not. Just making sure we don't run him over. No, I think this guy.
He doesn't give a shit.
Uncle don't care.
They don't just
be 0 macam. Okay, so I guess the car is not as interesting as I thought. But when I started reviewing this BMW 218i Gran Coupe, which I think looks way less impressive than the Arteon, people actually came up to us and gave us thumbs up and said stuff like, hey, nice car. I even got YouTube comments from people who somehow recognized it in my video about the passport renewal process in Malaysia, congratulating me on my new BMW. And that's the thing about a BMW that you won't get with like a Proton or a Volkswagen or a Hyundai. It's that recognition of achievement from society. That recognition that you've hit a milestone in your life, that you've made it. And if you're talking about being that kind of symbol, I think the BMW 218i Gran Coupe is the perfect car for the job. It is, after all, the most affordable BMW you can buy. And yes, it's not particularly great to drive, nor is it particularly spacious or high-tech, but it gives you just enough to give you a taste of what it's like to own a premium car. Those frameless windows, that leather upholstery, the nice chunky steering wheel, and most importantly, that BMW logo. This is probably a really upsetting reflection of our modern day society and how obsessed we are with stuff like image. But I'll tell you what though, if I sent a photo of me driving a BMW to my mom, she would be so proud of me. And that alone might be worth it.